what I feel drawn to talk about today, and I feel this is a real emerging theme for me that I think is going to be a theme for me through the year as it unfolds, is this matter of agency, of personal agency and personal power. Yeah? How the Dharma can help us claim and reclaim our agency in our life. The wisdom of the Dharma, as I see it, helps us to do that, and then as we do that, it helps us to use it. It shows and shares how to wholesomely exercise that agency and that power. It's very alive for me now to really have the Dharma and the practice be a living, informant for this matter of modern life that we're all experiencing at different phases. So I can mention that this life practice group that I've been talking about for a few weeks and that we're putting together is coming together. We're getting a location for that. We had a board meeting last Thursday it was, and that board meeting had been delayed twice because I was sick and there was something else that came up a few weeks ago. So it's taken a little bit of time to kind of get our ducks in a row on that. But I'm working with Kate actually on a location potentially for. Okay. So we've got some locations developing for that, and it looks like we'll start that off on Sundays. And what that is it's an opportunity to really, from a Dharma perspective, to discover how we can make commitments in these areas of our life, in our work, in our personal relationships, as well as in our spiritual practice, in a way that's informed by the wisdom of the Dharma, and that really empowers us to take agency for decisions in these areas of our lives. And when we take the agency, that's where the atonement with our own karma really comes from. That's how we atone for our karma, and that's how we realize ourselves as being bigger than this isolated psyches, that we dream ourselves to be. We have to discover that that's not the case by actually putting that into practice in the world. Okay, it's always sourced in our zazen. That's the source of it in Zen Buddhism. But putting it into practice in these different environments of our lives, it's essential. It's essential, really. Just to have an experience of emptiness and see deeply, into the nature of ourselves it's key and it's wonderful. But if it isn't actually put into practice every day in our lives, it's not so worthwhile. Okay, and it's also not really actualized in our lives. All the great realized beings, throughout history, have always actualized their understanding in their lives, in their relationships, and in their work in the world. So that part of it is really coming alive for me. So I'll share a few words, and I'm kind of expanding on some of the things I've said in my last few Dharma talks. At the Zazenkai, I wanted the theme to be intimacy with self. So I gave some guiding words at the beginning about being intimate with yourself. It's something that I heard Maizumi Roshi share, many, many times. I can't count how many times I heard him say that. You must be intimate with yourself. You must be intimate with yourself. That's where your agency comes from, right? The Buddha also said, be a lamp unto yourself. Don't listen to any other teachers or traditions or inherited, cultural understandings. You can learn them and listen to them, but don't take them to be the ultimate authority. You are the ultimate authority. So you always try and test everything that you hear from others put it into practice and see if there is real wisdom there, right? And when you encounter someone who appears to have, wisdom and actualization, that you can sense that, you can see it or feel it, things that they've said conform with things that you've experienced, then listen to them and give them, the credibility of whatever authority that they've validated for you. Okay? But that's your lamp. That's your lamp that's actually shining on your experience, what you're hearing and what you're feeling. Take it in and try it out. And becoming intimate with ourselves means really not resisting any of the difficult experiences that we encounter through our days. We're never going to advance spiritually. No one will ever advance spiritually by establishing a comfort zone that they stick in. Emotionally or physically, but primarily emotionally. Spiritual development is about shifting your own experience of yourself. Right? Dogen said to study Buddhism is to study the self. It's not to study God. It's not to study the nature of reality. It's to study the self. And by studying yourself, your experience of yourself shifts. That's spiritual development for Buddhism, the shift in the self sense. From a limited self to the self that includes everything, the big self. Book of Equanimity, case 94, Tozan's illness, the one who is not sick. Master Tozan was ill. A monk asked, "Osho, you're sick. Is there someone who is not sick?" Tozan answered, "Yes, there is." The monk asked, "Does the one who is not sick look after you?" Tozan replied, "This old monk is able to look after others." The monk asked Osho, "How about when you look after others?" Tozan said, "Then the having of sickness is not seen." Buddha said, "I teach one thing and one thing only, suffering and the end of suffering." So here we have suffering, illness, and we have the end of suffering. Tozan says, then the having of sickness is not seen. I'm no longer experiencing that suffering of the sickness. This is a really powerful koan. It's very eerie. It might seem really counterintuitive. I hopefully it does seem counterintuitive. Let's unpack it a little bit, okay? So Master Tozan is late in his life. He's actually quite old. I'm not sure exactly how old. It might be in his 80s. And one of his monks comes to him and he says, "Oh, Osho, teacher, are you actually," he doesn't even ask him how he's doing. He says, "You're sick. Is there someone who's not sick?" Right? I mean, it's a very kind of crude question to ask. When we study this koan, we want to appreciate how sort of somewhat disrespectful even he is in his attitude here. Is there someone who's not sick? Now he's asking him, what about Buddha? What about a kind of transcended consciousness? All right? Are you able to manifest, this big self that isn't troubled by your sickness? And Tozan actually says, "Oh, there is someone who isn't sick. Yeah, right now I'm not limited to my personal experience, you could say." or self-centered experience. That's a more accurate way to put it. I'm not limited by that. So there is. And now now the monk, you can almost feel him like wanting to hear, a certain answer to the question. He says, "Oh, well, does that one who is not sick look after you? Is that Buddha taking care of you in your illness?" I hear in the monk's question here, like that's what he wants, right? He wants, "Oh, I want Buddha to take care of me." Yeah, that's what I'm looking for. I'm looking for that. Ha, Tozan turns him. No, this old monk is able to look after others. The one who's sick, is the one who is taking care. In fact, in another translation, he says, I have the opportunity to take care of the person. I'm taking care of the one who is not sick. Or I'm taking care of others. I'm taking care of this one. I'm taking care of the all. The one who is sick is taking care. So right here is the core teaching of not looking for something other than your current state or condition. Fully embracing it. This is where our power is. This is where our agency is. We can only reclaim our agency by fully accepting our conditions, even embracing them. Any sort of mind that resists that illness. So now this illness we're talking about, it's all of us. It's all of our afflictions. Right? It's our pain, it's our confusion, it's our anxiety, it's our loneliness. That's what we're talking about. We're not only talking about a physical illness. It's our fearfulness. Right? Always in the egoic consciousness, there's that kind of hope almost, that vision. Of not having those things. Of shifting away from those things and having the relief of those conditions disappearing. But all of that movement of mind and heart will perpetuate the core suffering that we experience and keep us away from our true nature and keep us away from our own agency. It's disempowering to feed that subtle separation from our own state. And it can be very subtle. It is very subtle. Right? This is subtle work. Really feel in, you almost have to feel in waves. It's waves, because, sensation kind of tends to come in waves and pulses and then fades and comes back. So we really have to stay with it through all of the ups and downs and really accept the rise and fall of those afflictive conditions. What happens when you take care of that person? The monk asks. I think his imagination was sparked actually by that. It's like, he wasn't expecting Tozan to say this. This one takes care, that one. It's like, oh, well, what's that about? At that time, I don't see the sickness. Then the having of sickness is not seen like that. In that translation, and that translation I just said is the one that Shishin Roshi uses in his book of equanimity, in his commentary. And that one's even better, right? Then the seeing, the having of sickness is not seen. He's actually taken the I right out of it. Having of sickness is not seen. There's no longer an I to see the sickness. You could say that too, because it's a spiritual process of fundamentally shifting your experience of yourself. So here's the relief of suffering that Buddha talked about, the end of suffering that Buddha talked about. But we have to take care of all beings as the suffering being. Your confusion takes care of your confusion and of others' confusion. Your fear takes care of your fear and others' fear. Your pain takes care of your pain and others' pain. I had a cat that I adopted, had 3 legs. Not sure how he lost one of the legs, but it was one of his back legs. And boy, that cat knew no limitation. I mean, he just moved that right into between like a perfect tricycle and just would run everywhere. No sense of limitation. Very happy. I called him Tycho. I actually named him after Tycho Brahe. If anybody of you know the astronomer, yeah, so he famously, he didn't have a nose, right? He had lost his nose in some kind of accident, I think it was, or somehow he had lost a nose. So, I studied physics, so I kind of liked all these old scientists and astronomers. So that missing nose kind of just anyway. It's like that. But it was true, he did not know crippled. No, that was just a word that we applied to him. Humans applied to him. The having of crippledness was not seen. Okay? He just embodied his life. So when we really embrace this with all of these very difficult conditions of our life that emerge and sometimes persist. As we get older, some of these ailments, they start to stick around longer than they used to. We get closer, as we all are, to the big end. Start to fall apart. It's the richest material. We're actually transforming our own sense of ourself, waking up to our true nature, and really actually grasping our full agency. Because again, this is about full agency. Okay? We take the responsibility for taking care as the sick one of the sick one. We're making that choice. Okay? We choose to do it. We're not a victim of our circumstances. And there's so much power in that. Embrace your conditions and then choose how to act from those conditions. So much power in that. Bancho said, the ancients about to die frolicked in the realm of old age, sickness, and death. They frolicked in that realm. They didn't gut it out. They didn't bear it, grin and bear it. They didn't sort of masochistically suffer it. They actually frolicked in it. So we get rid of our ideas about life and death. We get rid of our ideas about sickness and health. We get rid of our ideas about could have, could be, should be. Get rid of all of those ideas. And then what do we have? Your life right now, as it is. So much more powerful and potent than any could be or should be. Some of you know the story of Tozan's final days. So this is Tozan, the same master here. Maybe it wasn't long after this, because he appeared to be very ill when he was talking to this monk. But when he was ready to die, he actually composed a poem for the assembly. He shaved his head, and he sat in zazen in the zendo in front of his whole, monastery, and he died, passed away on the seat. Well, all of his community started crying and wailing so much that he came back to life. He opened his eyes, and he was pretty pissed. And he scolded them all for not giving a dead man any peace. And he actually, he roused himself, and he made a meal for the entire community, and he called it the stupidity meal. And he extended his life actually for 7 more days. And then he bade them farewell again. And this time he really passed away. Yeah, he was disappointed, that they hadn't been able to really understand the wisdom, of his teaching, to really experience the emptiness of life and death. That doesn't mean don't grieve, It doesn't mean don't grieve. But I believe that he saw in his students a lack of insight into the nature of emptiness, a lack of insight into their true selves, and certainly a lack of equanimity in his passing. I think he would have preferred to have seen heartfelt grieving, equanimity, and then move on and take on the mantle of responsibility for the community and for the Sangha. Yeah. So this is a nice frolicking in the realm of life and death and suffering, the way he's manifesting here, to move through it. Oh. Yeah, so this is wisdom, for our agency, wisdom for how to establish our agency, taking responsibility, becoming intimate with ourselves, and then how to deploy that agency from a place of insight into our true nature, insight into emptiness. Okay. That's what this path is all about.